Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Smita Patel, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Gurpreet Mangat and Andrew Reed. EdData is a partnership of FCMAT CSIS, the California Department of Education, and EdSource. Our sole purpose is to make impartial K-12 education data for California available as widely as possible. All the data on the site are free. We have no commercial interests or agendas other than making it easy for you to access school district financial reports, student and staff data, demographics, information on outcomes such as state test results, graduation rates, discipline, and absenteeism data. The purpose of this webinar is to show you what's available on EdData and how you can make the most of the site's functionality. You can see our agenda for today's tour on the screen, starting on the EdData homepage. The central area here is the marquee where we feature the newest data. So you can see we released the school district financial reports. Up here is what we refer to as the white menu. You can use this to get to the different reports at each level, state, county, district, school, and then the comparisons. If you use this menu, it'll take you to the last entity that you have viewed. And we use cookies on the site only to support the navigation. We do not track personal data or sell or share in any form. Over here is our logo and the home button. This will bring you back to this homepage anywhere on the site. Another way to navigate around the site is from the county, district, and school red menu, as we call it. So for example, if we wanted to look for Fremont Elementary School in Long Beach, you could go to Los Angeles, Long Beach, Unified, and then Fremont. Click go, and it'll take you into that district. You'll see some summary information at the top. Sorry, that's school. Administrator, the status of the school. We have data going back to 2009-10, so there are schools that have since closed, but we still have data for prior years on EdData for those entities, and so that would be indicated here. Some websites, contact information, key attributes. The CDS code is the unique identifier. So this is the school code, the district code, and then the county code. It's the 19 there, the type of school, the span. And then as you come down here, you can get into the more detailed data. But for right now, I want to show you another way to find an entity on the website, which is the search button, search bar rather. That's available in the upper right corner of every page on the site. And so suppose we wanted to find Fremont High in Oakland rather than Fremont Elementary. So you can type in Fremont High and you'll see a whole bunch of schools with that name. But here we have the county and the school district, so it's helpful, and you can see that there's Fremont High here in Oakland. I'm going to quickly pop back to our homepage now. Down here, we have some reports that explain some of the new data. The new on EdData article just shows you what's most recent, and it also shows you how to get to it, so that can be a useful shortcut sometimes. There's some more information about EdData here. This helps you, provides shortcuts based on what you've been looking at in case you need to get back to something. You can subscribe to our email list here and contact us from the contact button here, or write to us at ed-data@edsource.org. So let's start by looking at the student demographic data on the site. And I'm going to do that from the white menu up here, go to the state, student, and then demographics. Now up here, again, you can see we have the state summary. In this case, it's much less detailed than we'd have for a school or school district, but you can look at the list of counties in California. At the county level, you would see a list of districts. At the district level, you would see a list of schools. See my X there. There we go. And here's a map which shows up to give the location for the school. In this case, it's the headquarters of the California Department of Education. Over here, you can see we have different sections of data, different tabs. So this is the student tab. There's also staff data. We have some local revenue election data and some financial data. This year slider allows you to go back and forth. Our graphs are presented in 5-year chunks, and so the slider moves in periods of 5 years. And so you want to make sure the site will remember. So if you go back to a previous year, make sure you're back on the year you want to see. Under student demographics, you see the first 3 graphs you see are different ways the state keeps count of its students. So we have census day enrollment, which is the count of students who were enrolled in a school on the first Wednesday in October at the start of the school year. Then you have cumulative enrollment, which is an end of year count of students. And this count is used when calculating graduation rates, discipline data, chronic absenteeism. And then you have average daily attendance, which isn't a count of students, but rather a count of the number of days attended by the students. And this is very important for funding. Now, I just want to mention that these are completely different counts taken at different times and in different ways, and so they should not be interchanged. Each of these graphs has a lot of information buried inside. So for example, with census day enrollment, you can get detail by student group by drilling into it. So let's look at enrollment by ethnicity and see the different race ethnicity groups. And you can expand this to view the table data. Up here, you can click the % number toggle to change that, and then that changes in the table as well. And here in the red bar at the top, we have some sharing tools. One that I use often is the generate a link function. So if this was a school and you had expanded the table data and you copied the link and sent it to someone, they would see the table in the form for that school that you had expanded. Down below, we have some chart notes. And if you see any text in green, it's for the glossary, which explains some of the terminology used in the site, for example, short-term enrollments. And there's a source tab here. Most of the data on the site comes from the California Department of Education. And so wherever possible, we offer links back to the downloadable files on the CDE website. We also have, in some of the newer data, an additional drill-in, which allows you to look at the number of students in charter schools or in traditional public schools or all students. So you can disaggregate that based on all these student groups. Just a quick tour through the rest of the graphs that we have here. We have the unduplicated pupil count, which is the starting point for the calculation under the local control funding formula. So this is how they determine which school districts get the supplemental and concentration funds. Then we have data on students eligible for free and reduced price meals, English learners, and again, you can toggle between the counts and the percentages. We have English language acquisition status and the redesignated fluent English proficient. This is the annual count of the number of students who were redesignated from English learners to being fluent in English. And this particular chart has a gap right now because the Department of Education recently changed the collection of the data from the fall 1 enrollment data collection to the end of the year data collection. So we're still waiting for those data to become available. And you can also see the top languages of English learners. These same graphs are available at the county, district, and school level. So you'll see all this information. You can kind of get in more specifically. Foster youth count. Ethnic diversity is a calculation that we created for EdData specifically, and it's to just help create a snapshot of how many different student populations in terms of race ethnicity are being served by a school district. So you could have a school that is 100% Hispanic students and it would not have a high ethnic diversity, or you could have a school where almost every student's from a different group, and that would have a higher ethnic diversity index number. And we have schools by type for the state, districts by type, charter schools, private schools, and private school enrollment is only shown here at the state level. This is just for context. And then we also have charter school enrollment and charter schools. So that's all the demographic information for the students that we have here. We also have performance, college career readiness, suspensions and expulsions, and chronic absenteeism data. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But Gurpreet, do we have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a question, is it possible to get the ethnic diversity data represented by the English learner numbers rather than by total enrollment?
The ethnic diversity data.
By English learners, yes.
So the ethnic diversity index calculation is just based on the different race and ethnicity groups that are at the school. And there's a whole complicated math calculation for how they come up with the index. I don't know how we do it by English learners, but maybe email us and we'll look into it. Anything else we should?
So Jeff is asking, is there any information on special education categories?
So this is the one area that we've really struggled so far, and it's because the Department of Education has had special education kind of in a whole different data system. There is work being done to try and integrate all that, so we're hopeful that we'll get more special education data. We were excited to be able to, with cumulative enrollment, have some data for students with disability. Previously, we didn't have any of that. So we're hoping. There's definitely a lot of work going on at the CD to try and integrate this. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to have more access to that kind of data, and we'll definitely add it when we can. Any others, Gurpreet? That we can also get to some later. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, that's it for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So then let's go into performance. This is the Smarter Balanced, or CASP test results. And so we have the English language, arts and literacy, and the CASP mathematics results. And this was a really tricky graph for us because you have 4 achievement levels, 5 years of data, and then all these different student groups. And so there are a couple of ways you can view the data. So for example, you can see all 4 achievement levels, and you could see all 4 achievement levels by, for example, a selected gender. So in this case, this is achievement levels for male students, and then achievement levels for female students. Or you can see results for both males and females, but by a selected level. So in this case, it's standard exceeded level 4, but we could also go to standard exceeded or met level 4 or 3, and then see it that way. It looks like we probably won't be getting any more healthy fitness zone, physical fitness exam data. These tests were discontinued during the pandemic, and I think the state is not planning to bring them back, or certainly not in this format. So these graphs will be probably falling off the site, but these are the 2 main sections that we have right now in underperformance. And we are talking, Gurpreet especially has been prompting us to think about how else we can present these data. So if there's something in the CASP section that you think would be helpful in the data, let us know. Then we have college and career readiness data, which shows the cohort graduation and dropout rate data, as well as the cohort graduates meeting the UCCSU. Those are the A through G requirements. We've added this graph just so you can see how many students there are in the 4-year adjusted cohort. This is a calculation. So previously, back in 2009-10, graduation rates were basically 1-year graduation rates. What percentage of the 12th grade class graduated? And now it's a more complex calculation of how many students entered 9th grade, removing those who transferred out and adding those who transferred in, and then calculating the cohort. So again, you can click on the little green link if you want more detail about exactly how that's calculated. The next section is suspensions and expulsions. So we have the suspension rate data. We have, again, you can toggle through the count and percent. And I think I forgot to mention this, but you can also, in addition to the table data below, you can also just mouse over to see what the numbers are. This is the suspensions by most serious offense category. And then this is the section, this graph shows the willful defiance category, and you can see there was a significant reduction in those suspensions. Then we have similar expulsion rate graphs. And then below that, we have data on chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is defined as students who miss 10% or more of the school year. And again, there are some students who aren't considered eligible to be chronically absent if they're short-term enrollments. And so there's a special calculation for which students are eligible. And so that's what we have included over here. So that is our student data. Are there any questions here, Gurpreet, that we might want to
Smita, can you show the sharing options for the chart and how to download the data for a particular chart?
Yes, thank you. So here we have, for example, the chronic absenteeism rate. So we have these different share buttons, and you can also download the data clicking on the Excel button here. You can also save it. You can make a copy. You can email a link. You can print it. So those are some of the different ways you can share the data. Other questions? Okay.
No more questions.
All right. All right, then let's go over to a school district and take a look at some of the other data we have available. So for this, I'm going to go over to Riverside. So actually, I'll show you the shortcut. I was looking at FCMAT Unified earlier, so we can just jump over to FCMAT. Again, here's that information, the summary information and the list of schools. You can also see that this has got populated with Riverside and FCMAT, and you can navigate to schools from up here. Remember to click that Go button if you do use that red menu. And here you'll see that we have student data, staff data, local revenue, elections, and financial data. The staff data are, start with the demographics. We're still awaiting teacher demographic data. It hasn't been released for the past few years, so we're still hoping to get that soon. But on these graphs, you can drill in to look at teachers by ethnicity, and you can also look at teachers by gender. You can use the percent count number toggle. And I forgot to mention this, but you can also filter out. So if you're looking at ethnicity and you only want to look at certain ethnic groups, like you could filter out the ones that you weren't needing to look at that moment. The data still remains in the table, regardless of what filters you apply to the graph. We have pupil-teacher ratios, average teaching experience, and first and second year teachers. So we're hoping to get those data soon. We also, at the district level, have teacher salary data. This comes from the J90 form. It's a voluntary form submitted by school districts. not all school districts submit it, but almost the vast majority of them do, and they serve the vast majority of students in California. So here again, you can see this graph is showing you the average for all districts, the average for unified district, and then the yellow line is this district. You can see the numbers down here. You can also look at the teacher salary schedule, which is, I know, incredibly busy, but it has a lot of information if you want to see how different districts handle their salary schedules. You can see the change in teacher salaries and also the benefits data over here. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Gurpreet, any questions?
So I think Amy was asking, when will the staff data be released from CDE?
Yeah, so that we don't know. We're hoping soon, but we don't have a date yet. So we're eager for it though. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
Okay, cool. All right, well, then I want to get to what was our reason for being. Data was actually originally created so that we could make financial data accessible. And, you know, if you are a data wonk and have access software, then you could download the full financial data files from the CDE website, but most of us don't. And so we have detailed financial data reports on EdData. And the purpose of this is to make it as sort of easy to understand and accessible to as many people as possible. So I'm going to, for some reason, I've popped down to 2020-21. So I'm going to just make sure I'm in the correct the year here. And then start with revenues and expenditures. Now, these are a bunch of funds, and I have to, I'll make the disclaimer now that I do not have the in-depth knowledge of these financial data and funds that my colleague Christine Davis of the CDE has, but we do have a webinar that she did for the financial data and EdData, and we'll share the link with you for that if you want more detailed information. But you can also always reach out to us on the EdData email if you have specific questions, and we will check in with our colleagues at the CDE and see what we can get for you. So again, the government will fund most of a school district's revenue goes through the general fund. And so that's what our reports mostly focus on. But this section also just provides some high-level information on the other funds. So it has the July 1st beginning balance, total revenues, total expenditures, other financing sources, uses, and then the June 30th ending balance. Wherever you see something, a blue text with a downward arrow, you can click on it and get more information. So for example, you can see that there are certain the charter school special revenue fund and other funds that are being reported by this district. Similarly, we have these proprietary funds, again, just very high level information, fiduciary funds. And then there's the general fund revenues by source, which shows the total unrestricted resources. And it shows you unrestricted, and then it shows you state lottery funds. And again, it's blue and there's an arrow, so we know we can expand that. And what it's showing you here is the beginning balance. It's showing you the sources. And then down here, it's showing you some of the expenditures by type. Close that. Close that. One area that might be interesting is the federal resources and the state resources, unrestricted. Sorry, both of these are restricted fund sources of funding that were allocated for specific uses. And so a lot of people are talking about COVID relief funding. So you can find that in here. And this is ESSA funding, the Every Student Succeeds Act. So again, you can expand it to see where some of the funding was used. There's a lot of detail. And again, I'm not going to try and explain all of it, but feel free to reach out if there are questions. And similarly, at the state level, the state restricted resources, you can see some of the, like the ACES program has funding here, and you can see where the expenditures for those funds. Also just want to mention that the columns here show you the total revenues, and it shows you this district per ADA, the dollar per student ADA, and that's the ADA graph we were looking at earlier, average daily attendance. And it's telling you that the ADA for this district is 18,362. And then this is the average for unified school districts. So you can see this district's actually a little bit higher than the average. And then this shows you that's the percentage, and then this is the dollars. So you can see 14,000 versus 13. And then this is the statewide average for all districts. So again, just different ways of providing data in context. One of the things we always say with that data is that we are not here to give all the answers, but we want to help you ask the right questions. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I just want to stress that these are unaudited actuals. So these are the data reported by school districts to the state. So they might get changed after the audit, but for the most part, this is the report that was reported to the state. And we don't have charter school data, unfortunately, on data. We would love to get that, but charter schools can report their data in a variety of ways, and we haven't quite figured out how to make that fit. It's not compatible with the account code structure, the SAC system that is used for most school districts reporting. And then here's a year-end summary for the general fund. The next section here is general fund revenues. So it shows you general fund revenues by object code. Now here we have the data table and also a couple of graphs to help visualize the data. Whoops, my graph ran away. Okay, so it shows you per student revenue trends. And then down here, it shows you a revenue by category. So you can see how much was from LCFF, our local control funding formula, versus federal revenue versus other. And you can toggle that. Most of the financial data are, however, in the tables. I would encourage you to take a look at the notes. They explain what you're seeing in the table. And again, you can expand to see the more detailed codes, object codes in this case, and the money. It shows you what percentage of those funds are unrestricted versus restricted, the total, and then it shows it to you per student ADA, and then how that compares to other school districts. Similarly, you can see more detail on federal revenue. And you can see, for example, a lot of special ed money is restricted versus the forest reserve funds, which are unrestricted. The next section is general fund expenditures. First table here is general fund expenditures by object code. And again, it shows you the different object codes. You can expand them here. Now, if you see these yellow question marks, you can click on them and expand our account codes glossary. This is the California School Accounting Manual, and these are the SACS account codes. So this tells you what that section contains, what's reported under that number and heading. Again, we have some graphs here. So you can look at how the different data compare. I'm sorry, my graphs are a little jumpy today. This depends on the resolution of the screen, and you can actually move them around if you want them in different orders. So again, that's just one more way to view it. You can share those graphs. You can also share the tables using this to create a link, or the Excel download. Now, if you want, the Excel download will download whatever is visible. So if you wanted all of these categories expanded, you could expand them and then download them. Then all the different rows would show up. Whereas if they're not expanded, just these would show up. Again, here's the note that explains the data. The current expense of education per ADA is a calculation made by the California Department of Education, and it tries to remove all the other expenses and just focus on the cost of direct educational services to students. So even though it's not 100%, but this is a good metric to use, or a good number to use if you're comparing how much different school districts are spending on students. So again, it provides the average daily attendance, the total number of dollars, and then per ADA expenses for this district compared to the statewide average for other unified districts, and then the statewide average for all districts. Then we have general fund expenditures by activity, and this is a place to look for, that common question of how much is spent on instruction versus administration. So for example, you can see that we've got general administration, and then we've got instruction here. You can expand the table to see the numbers. And you can swap to percentages. The table. So again, you can expand instruction to see where the money is being spent, and then get further detail there. And then we have the general fund and charter school costs by program reported by goal codes. So again, at other instructional goals, you can find a lot of detail in here. You can click these to get to know what qualifies as regular education. And then this is just other financing sources, again, high-level data, not as detailed as the revenues and expenditures data that we looked at. So that's financial data. Any questions about that?
No questions on financial data.
Okay, great. Am I going too fast? Please let me know if I'm like racing through too quickly, or if you need me to slow down or go over anything again. I wanted to be mindful of everyone's time and try to make sure we covered as much of the site as possible. So as I mentioned, financial data was the reason why data was first created. We added all the other data, the student demographics and staffing and performance data and all of that, to provide context for the financial information on the site. But another thing that is unique to EdData, I believe, is the comparisons we offer. They're very powerful and very flexible, so you can actually use them to create your own ways of slicing and dicing the data. So there are two ways to get to comparisons. One is from this white menu, and you can see you can compare districts or you can compare schools. The other way to do it is clicking this little icon here, and what that does is it keeps this district that we're viewing, Hammock Unified, in our comparisons. So it's useful if you want to compare others to the district that you were viewing. So over here, again, you can see you have the option to toggle between the district and the school. And you have the slider, which allows you to change the year. So for example, we hope to load the 2022-23 student enrollment data in the coming months fairly soon. And once those data are available, you'd be able to see those data and comparisons, but you wouldn't be able to see any of the other data until we get all of that loaded for the new year. So you might want to come back a year to see the most complete data set. So that's one of the reasons why this is useful. You're able to export your comparisons or share links to the comparison. The export function, just a note, because there's so much data involved here, it tends to time out the browsers, the individual user and browsers tend to time out. So we've had to limit the number of entities that can be exported to 1,500. So if you're doing school comparisons and you're trying to export, thousands of schools, you might need to use the filters to sort of break up the downloads by batch. So over here, where it says add data element, you can see all the data elements offered for your comparison. So these are all things that you can compare on or sort by. And comparisons have a couple of functions. One is, of course, to compare two districts or more, or two schools or more. But another way is just to see what's in a county, what's in a district, or to make a list. What's the highest graduation rate? What districts have the highest graduation rates, or what schools have the most English learners? You can use the comparisons to do those kinds of things. So over here, you can see HEMET Unified is pinned because we came here through that little portal from the HEMET profile page. You could unpin it by clicking on that. You can also pin another district if you wanted by typing in that district's name. Now, once you're in the comparisons, you can add data elements in addition to from that big list from the 3 little dots next to the summary. So for example, if you're going to compare the download from our comparisons to other data sets, you might want to get the CDS number, because then you have a unique identifier and you don't have to deal with all those similar names. You might want to only look at districts in Riverside County. So you could type in Riverside and save it. And then you'll see the total results count has gone down. And if you want to clear a selection, you can refresh the page, or you can just go back into the filter and remove it. You can also compare, you might only want to compare this to other unified school districts. So you could select unified school districts and click save here. So now we're only seeing the unified school districts. Now, over here, you'll see the next section is student demographics, where you can pull in a lot of that information on student groups. You can also sort by demographics. So for example, this is the census day enrollment. So if I want to sort by enrollment, it always goes to the low end first. So you have to click it twice to get the top level enrollment. And you'll see that we still have HEMET here into the first spot, but then the highest enrollment is obviously Los Angeles Unified, followed by San Diego. Now, suppose you wanted to exclude Los Angeles, because that's skewing, you're not looking at that big a district. You can use this filter here to reduce the size. So you can say, okay, I just want 67,000 as the ceiling. And then again, it's reduced the count of districts and it's resorted your results here. You could also sort by which district has the most English learners. So again, it's gone to the lowest first, and now it's the highest. If you then wanted to check out Calexico Unified, you could just click over here and it would take you to the profile page for that district. The next section is student performance. So here we have the CASP data. We've defaulted, just because it's easier for comparison, to the math and the English standards exceeded or met. So that's the 3 and the 4 or above. But if you wanted to see it by level, you can also add it, and then it'll show you how many students in each level. Then similarly, we have college readiness data. So we have the cohort graduates. You can add in the UCCSU A through G requirement data, or the dropouts if you wanted, by clicking over here. And you can also pull in, graduates by race, ethnicity, and other features like that over here. So for example, you have the graduates by race and ethnicity, and you can look at the different ranges and narrow them if you're looking for, a certain proportion. You can, this little checkbox here is to include missing data. So if you want to get rid of NAs, you can uncheck that checkbox and it won't show you data if there's an NA. But that might be too, you just have to be aware that you did that, because it's possible for that to skew your comparison. So just be mindful of that. And if you want to remove a data element, you just click the X over there. Similarly, we have the suspensions, expulsions, chronic absenteeism, staff data, and then we have the finance data over here. So we default to that current expense of education comparison. So if you wanted to see how HEMET compares to other districts, and if you wanted to further narrow, the enrollment to only look at how it compares to districts of a similar size, you could use the enrollment filter to do that. And then you can also add additional information. So you can add expenditures, you can add revenues, and you can add expenditures per student. So we've got all of those data. Once you've got the comparison to what you want in it with the number of entities and the filters applied, you can export it or you can share it. You can use this next button to scroll through the results. So if you want to go to the next page, you'll notice that HEMET remains where it is. If you want to sort the districts alphabetically, you can do that. And I think that's about it, but Gurpreet, let me know what I've missed. I'm sure I've missed a bunch of things. If you
Smita, you can add county and state numbers with the filters if they want to compare it to the county and states for the performance.
Yes, that's a good one. Thank you. So over here, you have the state and then the county. So if you wanted to see how the enrollment in this district compares to the overall state enrollment, or the county, the number of students in the state or in the county, that filter will do that for you. And then you can uncheck it if you don't want that. Also, I refreshed this to clear my the selections I'd made, but if you suddenly realize you wanted to go back, you should be able to click on district comparison and go back to the last comparison. And then similarly, we have the school comparison. And here we have 3 things already by default in the county name. So that includes, the county name, the district name, the school type in the summary section. So you can choose whether it's a high school or elementary. You can eliminate any types that you don't want in your comparison. You might want to see all the schools in a district. So for example, if I wanted to see what we have in San Jose Unified, I can just select San Jose Unified and it's reduced it to just those schools. I might want to know whether they're charter schools or not. So I can check the charter school yes, no option for that. And you can see that it's identified. If I only want to see charter schools, then I can select the yes, and it reduces it down to the 3. Okay. All right. I'll pause for some more questions if there are any.
And no more questions, and audience can ask those questions in the question answers box.
Okay, yeah, please feel free to use the Q&A. Is there anything I should go over again? Did I miss? Anything I rushed through too quickly? We do have local revenue election data. These are the bond and parcel tax elections. And we have the graph that shows 10-year data, and we also have individual election. That's in the detail down here for bonds and parcel taxes. Are there any questions about specific demographics graphs? Happy to review those. Wow, I think we actually, I hope this isn't because I was hard to understand or follow, but if we were able to cover the whole site in this time, that's really exciting.
So there's a question, Smita. Could you explain the measure of school segregations?
School segregation is not something we have a special graph to quantify. So that's a challenging one. I guess you could use comparisons to look at this. And what you would do is, so we'd want to be in the school comparisons. And then we'd come into our student demographics, and we would want to look at ethnicity, race, percentage, and it would show us all the different groups. And then you actually have an option up in the summary to look at the zip code for different schools. So this would require more analysis than you could probably do in comparisons. Gurpreet, correct me if I'm wrong, but in our data comparisons, but you could certainly download data and then look at the schools and the different distribution of student race and ethnicity and extrapolate from that. And again, I think I forgot to mention this, but this is another really important thing that comparisons offer. In the profiles, you're looking at one school or one district, whereas in the comparisons, you can look at a number of entities side by side. And so that's a really important, that's something we found we wanted to do a lot, and we felt it would be useful for our users. Other questions?
Also, we can add ethnic diversity index, and that is a measure of
diversity.
How diverse is the school? Yeah.
Right.
Or the district.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good point, Gurpreet, because then if you see very low diversity, that means that you have mostly students of one kind of race or ethnicity. So here you can see that there's a lot of NAs showing up. So I'm going to remove the include missing data, and that's going to take away some of the entities that were, and I can also filter here in the school type. So I may not want special ed and continuation schools. So we'll just pick the kind of save. So that would reduce some of the things. And then again, if I don't want to see zeros, I can use the slider to move it up and show different schools. So again, now I had cleared away Hamet, so it's no longer pinned, but it is showing you the schools that have less diversity versus if we do it the other way. This is some of the schools that have the most students from different backgrounds attending one school. Gurpreet, anything to add to that or other questions?
No, it's just the ethnic diversity is the measure. So if it's 100, that means it's equal. All the races are equally divided within that school, and if it's 0, then there is just one race within that school. So that's how, as the number goes up, the diversity is more in that school, in plain terms.
Right, right. And, in the old ed data site, which some of the folks here might remember, we used to have a percent minority graph or table. And then that sort of became meaningless because, there are schools where it's very hard to know what minority means anymore. And so the idea was to focus on diversity, and because some schools have just a lot of different student populations, and it was just to see how much diversity a school has. And again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for using the site. Thank you for attending this webinar. Huge thanks to Gurpreet and Andrew for all their help making this happen. We will continue to try and get new data and fill in the gaps in our data, and we'll definitely send out emails once those data are loaded. And we welcome your questions and your suggestions. The EdData website is truly a labor of love. It's operated on a shoestring budget. And everyone who works here just believes that it's very important to make data available to people in a format that's understandable. So please reach out with questions and suggestions.